The second son, Asa Jr., known to everyone as Buddy, went bigger. His estate, Briarcliff, sat on 42 acres just north of his brother's property. The Georgian Revival Mansion featured its own Aeolian organ, larger than Charles's. It also included 2 swimming pools, a golf course, a working farm, and a private zoo. Where Charles built for respectability, Buddy built for spectacle. Their sister Lucy, the only daughter, married a banker named Henry Hines. They built Rainbow Terrace on Ponce de Leon Avenue, an elegant home with formal gardens and a library that would later become the most infamous room in the family's history. Walter, the third son, built Lullwater House on a wooded property with a creek and waterfall. He was a businessman and horse sportsman, quieter than his brothers, and his estate reflected a preference for land over architecture. The house and grounds were eventually purchased by Emory University. Lullwater has served as the university president's residence ever since. The youngest, William, built Rest Haven on Springdale Road. Designed by the noted architect Neil Reed, it was the most restrained of the 5 estates. William had no interest in building a monument. His home fit the neighborhood rather than towering above it. He became president of the Atlanta Biltmore Hotel and died in 1936 at just 46 years old, the first of the siblings to go. Their father watched all of this from his own mansion at 1500 Ponce de Leon Avenue, a house he had built the same year he became mayor. Asa Sr. had built a fortune by spending as little as possible. His children had learned a different lesson, but the money he had created was now scattered across Druid Hills in the form of pipe organs, swimming pools, and private zoos. The family had turned Coca-Cola money into a small kingdom. Chapter 6: Buddy's Zoo and the Fall of a Fortune. Of all the Candler children, the one Atlanta could not stop talking about was the second son. Asa Griggs Candler Jr., known since boyhood as Buddy, had been trouble from the start. At Emory College, he skipped classes, smuggled a goat into the bell tower, and earned the yearbook title of class pugilist. His father sent him to Los Angeles to open Coca-Cola's West Coast operations. He spent most of his time in pool halls. But Buddy had energy, and money forgave a great deal. He built the Briarcliff Hotel in Atlanta's Virginia Highland neighborhood. He supervised construction of the airfield that would eventually become Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. He raced airplanes. He collected magic tricks from China and India, and later hired a Filipino magician named Jose Cruz to live on the estate and perform at parties. He hosted soirees in a gold leaf ballroom on the top floor of his mansion, where professional magicians mingled with Atlanta's society crowd. Then, in the early 1930s, he bought a zoo. The animals arrived by truck and were paraded through the residential streets of Druid Hills to the Briarcliff grounds. His brother Walter reportedly looked on and said it was the biggest fool thing Buddy had done yet. The collection included a Bengal tiger, 4 lions, a black leopard, a gorilla, baboons, and a group of elephants he named Coca, Cola, Paws, Refreshes, Refreshing, and Delicious. He opened the grounds to the public and charged 25 cents admission. The neighbors tolerated the noise and smell for a while. Then a baboon escaped, attacked a woman, and devoured $60 in cash from her purse. She sued. She won $10,000. Buddy, facing mounting financial trouble, was forced to close the menagerie. He donated the entire collection to the Grant Park Zoo, which eventually became Zoo Atlanta. The drinking, which had followed him since college, never stopped. He sold the Briarcliff estate in 1948 and spent his final years in the penthouse of his own hotel. He died on January 11, 1953. The mansion he left behind was converted into an alcohol treatment facility, the first in Georgia. And the moment that made both possible arrived not in a boardroom, but on a battlefield. Chapter 10: 5 billion bottles. In 1941, the United States entered a war and sugar was rationed. For most American companies that relied on it, this was a crisis. For Robert Woodruff, it became the greatest business opportunity of the 20th century. He issued a directive that year. Every man in uniform would get a bottle of Coca-Cola for 5 cents wherever he was stationed, whatever the cost to the company. It was patriotic. It was also brilliant. Because the military classified Coca-Cola as essential to troop morale, the company was exempted from sugar rationing entirely. In June of 1943, General Dwight Eisenhower sent an urgent cable from Allied headquarters in North Africa. He requested 10 portable bottling plants, 3 million filled bottles of Coca-Cola, and enough equipment to produce the same quantity twice a month. Within 6 months, a company engineer had flown to Algiers and opened the first plant. By the war's end, 64 bottling operations had been erected across Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific, set up as close to combat zones as possible. The company sent 148 employees overseas to build and maintain the plants. They were issued Army uniforms, given the rank of technical observer, and treated as commissioned officers. The soldiers had their own name for them, the Coca-Cola Colonels. More than 5 billion bottles were consumed by American service personnel during the war. The drink arrived by supply ship, by cargo plane, and sometimes by jeep, dispensed from small mobile units designed to keep Coca-Cola cold without reliable electricity. For soldiers in foxholes and field hospitals, it was not a beverage. It was a piece of home. But the lasting effect was not sentimental. It was strategic. In every country where those 64 plants operated, local populations tasted Coca-Cola for the first time. When the war ended, the infrastructure remained. Plants that had been built to serve soldiers were converted to serve civilians. Between the mid-1940s and 1960, the number of countries with bottling operations nearly doubled. What had begun as a wartime gesture became the foundation for a global business that no competitor could replicate. Even the Soviet military developed a taste for it. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, who led the Red Army into Berlin, was introduced to Coca-Cola by Eisenhower during post-war negotiations. Zhukov liked it so much that he requested a special colorless version, so it would resemble vodka and draw less attention from Moscow. The company quietly obliged. By the time Robert Woodruff stepped back from daily management in the mid-1950s, Coca-Cola was no longer an American product sold abroad. It was a global presence. The 5-cent promise he had made to the military had returned more than any advertising campaign could have purchased. He first tasted Coca-Cola sometime in the late 1880s. Candler suffered from chronic headaches. Someone offered him a glass. He liked it. More importantly, he watched other people like it. While Pemberton saw medicine, Candler saw a refreshment. The acquisition of the formula cost him roughly $2,300 across several transactions. What came next cost him everything he had in a different sense. His first strategic decision was critical. He stopped advertising Coca-Cola as a cure for ailments and began promoting it simply as a delicious drink. In 1892, he incorporated the Coca-Cola Company with an initial capitalization of $100,000. Then came the coupons. Thousands of handwritten tickets offering a free glass at any participating drugstore. He sent barrels of syrup to pharmacies that had never heard of the product, wagering that once people tasted it, they would come back and pay. By 1895, Coca-Cola was sold in every state and territory in the country. Syrup sales had grown from roughly 9,000 gallons in 1890 to more than 370,000 gallons by 1900. He also sold the bottling rights. In 1899, 2 lawyers from Chattanooga convinced Candler to let them bottle and distribute Coca-Cola across most of the United States. He charged them $1. He did not believe bottles would amount to much. Within 20 years, more than 1,000 bottling plants were operating nationwide. It was one of the most consequential misjudgments in American business. As wealth accumulated, Candler remade Atlanta. He completed the Candler Building on Peachtree Street in 1906, a 17-story marble tower that became the city's tallest structure and first steel skyscraper. He developed the Druid Hills neighborhood, personally financing roads and water lines. In 1914, he pledged $1 million and 75 acres to relocate Emory College from the small town of Oxford to Atlanta, where it became Emory University. His lifetime gifts to the institution totaled roughly $8 million. In 1916, he ran for mayor and won, handing control of Coca-Cola to his 5 children. The following May, A warehouse fire in the 4th Ward spread across 50 city blocks and destroyed more than 1,500 homes. Candler ordered houses dynamited to starve the flames. The city rebuilt. But by 1919, his wife Lucy was dead of breast cancer after 41 years of marriage. Within months, the children he had entrusted with his empire did the one thing he never expected. They sold it. Chapter 3: The Bottle That Conquered America. By 1915, Coca-Cola had a problem that had nothing to do with taste. It had imitators, dozens of them. On the 16th of August, 1888, every druggist in Atlanta locked the doors of their shop and walked together through the summer heat to bury one of their own. The man in the coffin had invented something, a dark carbonated syrup that he sold from a pharmacy counter for 5 cents a glass. He died broke, still chasing the morphine that had owned him since the Civil War. His name was John Stith Pemberton. The drink was Coca-Cola. Within 3 years of his death, an ambitious pharmacist named Asa Griggs Candler would claim full ownership of that formula. He paid, across a series of murky deals, a total of around $2,300. Candler turned those $2,300 into a corporation worth millions. He built skyscrapers. He bankrolled a university. He became the mayor of Atlanta. Then, in 1919, his children sold the entire company to a group of investors for $25 million. Today, the Coca-Cola Company is valued at roughly $340 billion. The Candler children used their money to build enormous mansions across Atlanta's most fashionable neighborhood. They filled those homes with pipe organs, exotic animals, and scandal. One heir drank himself to ruin. Another watched her husband die from gunshots in their own library. The patriarch himself ended his days in tabloid disgrace, married to a woman half his age. The family that replaced them, the Woodruffs, held on for 60 years and built a global empire from the ashes of the Candler sale. This is the story of Coca-Cola's 2 dynasties, what they built, what they lost, and the price of selling too early. Chapter 1: The Wounded Soldier's Recipe. On a warm Easter Sunday in April of 1865, Union cavalry under General James Wilson stormed the city of Columbus, Georgia. It was among the last engagements of the Civil War, fought days after Lee had already surrendered at Appomattox. Most of the soldiers defending the city knew the war was over. They fought anyway. Among them was a 43-year-old pharmacist, serving as lieutenant colonel in the 3rd Georgia Cavalry Battalion. His name was John Stith Pemberton. During the assault, a Union saber caught him across the chest. The wound nearly killed him. The morphine they gave him to manage the pain would finish the job slowly over the next 23 years. Pemberton had been a respected figure long before the war. Born in 1831 in Knoxville, Georgia, he earned his pharmacy license at 19 and built a successful practice in Columbus. His laboratory was considered among the finest in the South, stocked with $35,000 worth of specialized equipment. He married Annalisa Clifford Lewis in Chapter 3: The Bottle That Conquered America. By 1915, Coca-Cola had a problem that had nothing to do with taste. It had imitators, dozens of them. Companies with names like Coca-Nola, Toca-Cola, and Mo-Cola were filling identical straight-sided bottles with similar-looking syrup and hoping nobody would notice. Many customers did not. Paper labels peeled off in the ice buckets where shopkeepers stored their drinks, and once the label was gone, every bottle looked the same. The Coca-Cola Bottling Association wanted a bottle so distinctive that a person could recognize it by touch in the dark. Even broken on the ground, the shape alone should give it away. They sent the challenge to roughly 10 glass manufacturers across the country. In Terre Haute, Indiana, a team at the Root Glass Company went looking for inspiration. The designer, a machinist named Earl Dean, walked to the local library with a colleague and searched for images of the coca leaf and cola nut. They found neither. What they did find in the Encyclopedia Britannica was an illustration of a cocoa pod. Coca-Cola had nothing to do with cocoa, but the pod had an elongated shape with prominent ribs that caught Dean's eye. He sketched a bottle based on its curves. The original prototype was fatter than what eventually went into production. The bulging center would not fit the existing bottling machinery, so the design was slimmed and adjusted over the summer of 1915. The patent was filed under the name of Root Glass's plant supervisor, Alexander Samuelson. Dean chose lifetime employment at the company over a $500 prize. Bottlers across the country began using the new Contour bottle in 1917. Within a few years, it had become the most recognizable commercial container in the world. In 1950, it became the first consumer product ever featured on the cover of Time magazine. The bottle did more than sell drinks. It made Coca-Cola impossible to counterfeit, and it turned a liquid commodity into something closer to a branded object. When Asa Candler's children decided to cash out 2 years later, the Contour bottle was part of what made the company worth buying at a price that would have seemed absurd a generation earlier. Their father had handed them control of the Coca-Cola Company in 1916 when he became mayor. Their mother was dying. The business, while enormously profitable, faced an uncertain regulatory climate and growing legal battles over caffeine and labeling. When a syndicate led by Ernest Woodruff, president of the Trust Company of Georgia, offered $25 million, the Candler heirs took it. The deal closed on September 5, 1919. It was the largest financial transaction in the history of the American South. 500,000 shares were offered at $40 each. Investors across Atlanta lined up to buy. A single share purchased that year would eventually be worth millions. Asa Candler, still mourning his wife, accepted the sale with resignation. He later remarked that when he gave the children the business, it became theirs to do with as they wished. On the 16th of August, 1888, every druggist in Atlanta locked the doors of their shop and walked together through the summer heat to bury one of their own. The man in the coffin had invented something, a dark carbonated syrup that he sold from a pharmacy counter for 5 cents a glass. He died broke, still chasing the morphine that had owned him since the Civil War. His name was John Stith Pemberton. The drink was Coca-Cola. On a warm Easter Sunday in April of 1865, Union cavalry under General James Wilson stormed the city of Columbus, Georgia. It was among the last engagements of the Civil War, fought days after Lee had already surrendered at Appomattox. Most of the soldiers defending the city knew the war was over. They fought anyway. Among them was a 43-year-old pharmacist, serving as lieutenant colonel in the 3rd Georgia Cavalry Battalion. His name was John Stith Pemberton. During the assault, a Union saber caught him across the chest. The wound nearly killed him. The morphine they gave him to manage the pain would finish the job slowly over the next 23 years. After the war, Pemberton moved his operations to Atlanta, a city pulling itself from the wreckage of Sherman's march. He manufactured patent medicines and sold them across the region. But private agony drove his professional ambition. The morphine dependency that followed his injury consumed both his health and his income. He experimented constantly, searching for something that could replace the drug that was destroying him. His first significant attempt was a concoction he called French wine coca. It blended red wine with extracts of the coca leaf and the cola nut. The coca provided cocaine. The cola provided caffeine. He marketed it as a cure for nervous disorders, headaches, and fatigue. It sold well across the Southeast. But in 1886, Atlanta and Fulton County passed temperance legislation that banned the sale of alcohol. Pemberton's profitable tonic was suddenly illegal. He had to reformulate. What emerged was a thick, sweet syrup. Mixed with carbonated water at a pharmacy counter, it produced something altogether different from medicine. Pemberton's bookkeeper, Frank Robinson, suggested the name. He thought 2 capital C's